Right, good morning everyone. I would like to start with one of my favourite farming quotes by E.B. White. I think he hit the nail on the head very nicely. A good farmer is nothing more than a handyman with a sense of humour. I'm a very proud sheep and beef farmer from the Eden Valley in Cumbria, farming in partnership with my family in the beautiful North Pennines area of outstanding national beauty, as you can see. I came into what was a very conventional hill farming system as a third generation farmer, knowing from a very young age that I was going to follow in my dad's footsteps. But 10 years ago, due mainly to rising financial pressure and the realisation that hard work alone wasn't going to be enough to push the business forward and achieve our long-term goals, we went through a big change in farming system. This involved cutting out expensive inputs, simplifying, finding the right animal, and relearning pasture-based farming. Now, 10 years on, and seeing the results of these changes, this has brought me to my Nuffield Scholarship. So why did I apply for a Nuffield Scholarship? As I observed how the land and the ecosystem within it has changed over this period, it got me thinking about natural capital and what its true value is. Obviously, land already carries a rental value, and in a lot of cases, this already exceeds the returns that are achievable by red meat production. And typically, this is regardless of previous management or the soil health. So there's no doubt that land-based subsidies have had their part to play in increasing these values, but surely the land is worth what I can produce from it. As a farmer, this now isn't just a grass-fed prime animal, it's water infiltration, farmland biodiversity, carbon sequestration, air and water quality. All of these things I have seen improve on my own farm with this change of management. So the big question is, how do we reward farmers for these services and public goods alongside the production of nutrient-dense red meat? I travelled to some amazing countries over 3 continents, experienced a wide range of farming businesses. So I started in Papua New Guinea, pretty off the beaten track for a Cumbrian, but an amazing country with 5% of the world's biodiversity on 0.5% of the world's landmass. It was my first time in a tropical climate. I went to visit New Britain Palm Oil, who run one of the only half-stand plantations of palm in the world. They've been integrating cattle into that system for over 25 years now. This seemed like a huge win for me, particularly as beef is such a crucial part of the Papua New Guinean diet. We all know the ecological challenges of producing palm, but New Britain Palm Oil were the first company to be 100% certified sustainable. They're also the largest beef producer in Papua New Guinea, running 2 of the main abattoirs there. Originally, when the half stand was set up, I got the impression that it was a bit of a media gimmick, but the system was working well. The cattle were very happy grazing all the native grasses grown between the palms, and their fertiliser and chemical inputs were a fraction of what they were in a conventional full stand. But ultimately, at the end of the day, margins were driven by yield of palm, and there was no plans to integrate for the cattle integration to expand any further. I then travelled to Queensland, Australia, to meet Resource Consulting Services. Terry McCoster and his team there have been running holistic management courses for over 30 years. Terry is one of the pioneers of the regenerative farming movement in Australia. Having a chat with him, I quizzed him about my topic, to which he assured me the 5 principles of regen farming were absolutely key. Minimise soil disturbance, integrate livestock, plant diversity, maintaining a living root, and keeping the soil covered. It was also very clear that soil carbon was basically the answer to my studies. I thought there must be more to it than that. It can't be that simple. So farming in a brittle climate such as Australia is obviously very different to the northwest of England, but there's no doubt that these principles apply to both. Although when I visited some of the farms that RCS were working with, some of their soil organic matter levels were starting as low as 0.5%, which is very different to the 15 to 20% that I'm used to in some of my permanent pastures at home. South America was my next stop, starting in Chile's Central Valley. Due to its Mediterranean climate, producing fruit, veg, and some excellent wine, I can vouch for that. Having heavily reliant on irrigation, water provided from the snowmelt high up in the Andes, I spent the day on a kiwi, cherry, and vine farm with Roberto Contrado, an agronomist and consultant. Part of Roberto's advisory role is to visit each of his farms twice a month. He digs a metre square pit to look at the soil profile to see how the ongoing how ongoing management is affecting the soil health. Most of these systems are very reliant on chemicals, meaning that other than the tree itself, there is no living roots in the soil. This, coupled with the high water usage for irrigation, means that water compaction is an ongoing issue. Soil compaction is an ongoing issue. But this kind of proactive management and knowledge exchange, involving the whole team working together to address these issues and ultimately improve soil health, is undoubtedly the way forward. Being a beef farmer, it wouldn't have been right not to visit Argentina. One of the largest beef exporters, boasting areas such as the Pampas, who have arguably the best soils in the world. The Argentinians also love the beef, being the biggest consumer per capita than anywhere else. I visited Sir Beef, a family-owned feedlot in the San Luis region, running 80,000 cattle at any one time, making it one of Argentina's largest. Sir Beef was set up in the early noughties with the help of a huge government-funded hydro and irrigation system. This provides the water to irrigate 7,500 hectares, where they're growing crops for finishing cattle and soy for export. All of the cattle are contract finished, with majority of them spending less than 100 days in the feedlot. This kind of system obviously produces a lot of nutrients. This is why when we looked at the extensive data, or organic matter data that they'd collected over the last 20 years, the irrigated cropping land had showed an increase of 2%, which is quite a big increase for that kind of system. But when you consider that most of these nutrients had effectively been bought in a truck from somewhere else, it highlights the dangers of affecting such data. This is something we need to be very wary of going forward. So this brings me back to my original question. How do we reward farmers for these services? Land use, particularly in the marginal uplands, is rapidly changing. New industries in carbon storage, biodiversity net gain, nutrient neutrality and rewilding are increasing the demand for land. This is bringing in investment from outside the industry, whether that's multinational corporations offsetting their emissions, or whether it's large construction companies buying up land for the new biodiversity net gain rules that are coming into play next year. Going forward, this is going to open up a lot of opportunities for farmers, with ecosystem function key to providing these services and public goods. Upland farmers should be valued very highly as one of the few sectors in a position to make positive change happen. One of our main observations I've made during my scholarship is the key roles that trees have in our livestock and cropping systems going forward. Through incorporating agroforestry and silvopasture into our farming systems, we can increase biodiversity, improve water retention, enhance welfare, purify air, and ultimately build much more resilient businesses. Environmental schemes have provided funding over the last 20 years or so for trees, but this has been at the expense of taking land out of production. I think this is completely the wrong way of looking at it. We need cows in trees, not cows versus trees. So here's some of the examples of innovative ways I've seen on my travels of integrating trees into livestock, ranging from Perthshire, shelter, wood fuel, through to Australia, shade, water retention, down to Uruguay, where researchers were looking at the nitrogen fixing and nutritional values of the asada tree. So when I set out on my scholarship, I knew there was going to be no simple answer to my questions, as there is so many factors and challenges involved in valuing ecosystem services. We already have a certified woodland carbon code. with lots of work going ahead to try and create a similar soil carbon code. But this by its nature is a lot more difficult. It's going to take years of trials and baseline data, but even then, a soil sample is just a snapshot of time. It also brings challenges in making sure that farmers who have already made a positive change don't miss out on any potential financial reward. I actually think biodiversity will probably provide us a much more feasible option to reward good environmental land management going forward. We also need a shift in mindset away from yield-driven production to a more holistic thinking approach. This is obviously a lot easier said than done, especially when you consider the true cost of our food compared to that we actually see on our supermarket shelves. So what's the trigger? The reductions in farm support will no doubt play their part, and the shift towards a more environmentally based payment, coupled with rising input costs and a more holistic approach to land management, I am personally very excited about the future of the industry and the opportunities that lie ahead. And lastly, I'd like to thank Nuffield for the opportunity, both of my sponsors, HDB and the Merchant Staple of England, my wife and my family for supporting me during my travels. Thank you very much.